So
you tell me what you want.
And sometimes, some of them who do know, they think your child is like Rain Man, or your child must be good in music. You see?
I'm so glad that this is the era that she's been born in, and that we have a child to deal with autism in, because back, even 10 years ago, there wasn't early intervention. Like in Perth, it's only been the last 5 or 6 years that early intervention has been funded and, recognised through disability services, and they fund it. So, it's only been a recent thing. If she didn't have that, she would have been a child that everyone just gets, and she'll be all right eventually, just leave her, she's got a bit of language, let it go, it'll happen eventually, and all those behaviours would have just been stuck.
What happened for me at the age of about 17 was, in fact, my autistic behaviours seemed to increase, and I started talking out loud more to myself, finger flapping in front of my eyes, and hand flapping increased. Doctors said that I was having psychotic experiences, and they took me to a psychiatrist. I'd actually attempted suicide 2 or 3 times as well, because I didn't really see much point in staying in the world when I couldn't understand it. I went to the psychiatrist, and he said, Wendy, do you hear voices? And I said yes, thinking, silly man, you don't see voices. Everybody hears voices. That's what voices are meant for. You're meant to hear them, and then you can respond. And he said, yeah. I said yes. And then he said, what do these voices say to you? And I said to him, well, it depends on whose voice it is. And he said, oh, you hear more than one then? So he wrote down that I have auditory and visual hallucinations, and gave me a diagnosis of schizophrenia. And then I was put into an institution and given large doses of antipsychotic medication. And I had lots of antipsychotic medication over many, like 25 years after that, and was in and out of institutions often. It was extremely terrifying. It was very scary. Yeah, it was. I never felt at home with that diagnosis, and I don't believe it was accurate. I think, looking back, I didn't have a diagnosis of autism then. I had a diagnosis of intellectual disability, which was given to me as a small child, and then I got this diagnosis of mental illness, schizophrenia. I didn't get my diagnosis of autism until August 1994. I think it's really important, having this picture of yourselves, you then get a mirror picture of how people with autism are actually designed, how we're put together, remembering it's not one size fits all, remembering that people with autism are also individuals, their own personality, their own upbringing, gender, age, all the things that make you you, make us us. So there's going to be a very definite stamp of difference on everybody. Not all little kids with autism are in the corner flapping bits of paper. Not all kids with autism bang their heads and nibble their knuckles. Not all kids with autism will grow up and be engineers, but some will.
Most people in the field feel now it's going to be a complicated interaction between a genetic predisposition and certain things in the environment that might then interact with that, and there might be environments that are particularly bad for you if you're autistic.
There is some research that would seem to indicate that the incidence is increasing. On the other hand, there's other research that says, it's not increasing.
When you look at our waiting list, it's criminal. That these children sit for so long on waiting lists everywhere that a parent goes for an assessment and then the horrible realisation that their child has a difficulty and a lifelong difficulty for many children, and then they sit on a waiting list for a year or 2 years.
Well, we certainly don't know what aspects have gone wrong to cause autism. I mean, because just certainly looking at the brain in terms of things like relative size of different regions, you can't see anything obvious or gross if you look at the brain of somebody with autism.
And you can choose something else. What's this up there? Give it to Paige. Nice chair, eh? Stop and use your words. Tell me, what do you want?
Well, there's no autistic centre in the brain, that's clear. There are, in terms of the structure of the brain, a few differences one can find on MRI scans and things like that, but they're not specific. They can occur in a whole range of developmental problems.
We think that what happens in autism itself is that maybe you can have genetic characteristics that perhaps push you more in the direction of being somebody who's more interested in things than people, or somebody who's capable of being very focused rather than seeing the bigger picture. And we're really interested in this study of trying to look at people with autism and their relatives to see whether we can find genes that relate to these particular characteristics.
Is there any thinking that there are certain triggers then that would trigger that gene into action?
I think that's a very interesting possibility.
The nature of autism, described throughout the time we've ever known it and given it a word, is that some individuals, not all, and only the minority, that some individuals are normal, and something happens in the brain in that first or second or third year of life that social reciprocity switches off or doesn't develop, language disappears, and of course that's dramatic. And within the world literature and the expertise of people in the world of disability, all of us know some stories where there seems to be an event. But that's how people remember it in prospect.
I'm gonna bring my clothes over here.
Now let's put them on. Come on.
The triggers were different with both of the children. I do believe that fairly much across the board, a lot of autism, there's a genetic predisposition and then there's an environmental trigger. In Alexander's case, I do believe the triggers were most likely was vaccinations.
Put your shirt on.
I'm not convinced that's what affected Georgia, but by the same token, she did progress normally as far as what we discussed before, developmentally, right up to that 12, just after that 12, between 12 and 18 months, where you have the MMR. So I don't believe that autism is caused by immunisation, but I think if you have a genetic predisposition, that maybe it triggers it. That's my view on it, and that's obviously a very contentious issue.
I think that the real difficulty is once an idea gets out there, it's very hard to get rid of it. And certainly in the UK, I remember I was listening the other morning on the radio on our Today programme, which everybody listens to first thing in the morning, and somebody was calling for a public inquiry into the link between immunisation and autism. And the scientists that they had to respond to that said, well, we've had 3 or 4 inquiries. You know, the Medical Research Council has set up an inquiry. There have been a number of thoroughly reputable bodies looking at all the evidence, and there have been now a number of studies very solidly looking, you know, comparing children who've had immunisation with those who haven't, studied done in Finland. So there is absolutely no evidence, but nobody's going to believe us.
Jason, come and sit down.
Stand up.
Well, they may be disposed to some sort of environmental insult, but there seems to be the conventional view that you're born autistic, and rather than something in the environment triggering a problem, and that perhaps if you can identify that cause, then you can treat it.
Okay,
Now you do up my buttons.
Oliver, on the other hand, I believe, again, probably had a genetic predisposition, but the trigger was definitely, I think, antibiotics. And once we started trying to reverse that, you know, Oliver's improvement was quite rapid.
So clearly, we need to pursue these issues, we need to take them responsibly, we need to listen to people's concerns, but a lot of these issues are by association, and that's always a hard thing in medicine, by association. And there isn't really very strong evidence that's reproduced in a number of centres and different populations for most of the theories. Doesn't mean we shouldn't pursue them. It doesn't mean we shouldn't be serious about investigating them, but it does mean that we have to tell parents, sorry, there isn't a whole lot of knowledge about that.
I think one of the first things the government needs to do is start keeping records of the numbers of autistic children. It's very frustrating when doctors keep saying, oh, there's no evidence that it's really epidemic proportions. We think it's anecdotal. Well, it's epidemic proportions in every other country in the world where it's documented. But the Australian government has not kept records of the number of children being diagnosed with autism.
It is entirely possible that the epidemic isn't really an epidemic, it's just recognition of a wider range of children. But we don't know because we don't know what, we haven't got the comparative statistics from 10 years ago when these children just wouldn't have been recognised.
The issue about the rates of autism is reflected in our knowledge of all the other disorders, as I said earlier. We are more aware of the range, the spectrum. We are more aware of having to give a label to get people help. I will call people autistic who aren't really, because they will get special education that they need to function better, and that's what society should be doing. It minimises their cost to society later.
At the moment, he only gets about 5 hours a week, and I know for a fact that they've got a huge waiting list for children that don't have anything. And if there was funding, it would really save the government a heck of a lot of money later on, because this is the crucial time. The brain is still tender, they're learning heaps.
The cost to get someone to come out and to work with him is quite high. We really struggle to find the money to give him that sort of help, but we need to do that in order to give him.
Sorry. But how long can you provide that? That's the other thing.
Put on. You're going to do 3 more.
Well, in some areas, yes, he has improved. Because when Rohan started the Stepping Stones program, he was completely non-verbal. He had no words at all.
Giant Step Sydney is a multidisciplinary intensive program for children with autism. We offer individualised programs for children across the spectrum, offering individualised educational programs as well as therapeutic intervention.
From first day, he just ran in and was really happy and responded well to the therapies.
Bye, Alexander.
Bye, Alexander. Bye, Roman.
Say bye. You can say bye, Oliver.
Bye.
If you have a child whom you think even suspect has an autism spectrum disorder or is anywhere on that, even language delay, intensive work with young children just pays off so much better. And I know of children whom we see that we get in at 3 and 4, and we have siblings who are coming along who unfortunately may have an autism spectrum disorder, may not. They've benefited so much more greatly from being taught from 2 years onwards, and their potential is just unlimited if you can tap into it. But if a child sits on a waiting list until they're 3 or 4, until we have a vacancy for them, it's wasted time. It's such precious time, and you don't get it back. And that's the thing. People say, oh, look, next year, he'll get in next year. But if you don't get when they're young, it's just all lost. And it's not that you can't get it back, but it's just so much harder. Behaviours become entrenched. Language, if they have language, becomes really entrenched, and it's hard to move them on.
She's gone from a little girl who was significantly disabled in so many ways, socially, communication, everything, to a little girl that blends in fairly well. To the average person, she would probably just appear really shy. She's classed as having autism. Whether she would be, it's unlikely she would meet those criteria now. 18 months later, being an early intervention for 18 months, we've been very fortunate, very lucky. I shouldn't say lucky because it's been really hard work, but she would probably be reassessed at 5, and it would be unlikely that she would meet those criteria.
There's no certainty out there and there's so much controversy and debate, and where can you get advice? I mean, Australia is too, fortunately the internet has been a wonderful resource that for parents that preceded us that didn't have access to information like that, we know what's going on virtually in cutting-edge research, and we can, to a certain extent, we can pick up on it.
And there's no quick fix. You know, it does need to be, as I said before, you know, looking at all aspects of the child, and nutrition is a really important part of it. That gets the body and the gut and the immune system back in order, then the child's in a better place for learning.
Started the morning concoctions. In the United States, where they were simply looking at the gluten-free, casein-free diet, and they had tracked the development of children on the diet and children not on the diet. And, you know, I'm not a statistician, I haven't taken their studies apart with a fine-tooth comb, but essentially it showed that there was a substantial gain, you know, in the children who were on the diet.
Use the fork.
We try and follow a sensible diet by trying giving him less sugar when we can, and try not to give him much, you know, like food colorings and things, which I think is quite sensible, which is something that anyone would do. But to really go into the diet deeply, I think one's got to be really prepared.
I actually mix up my own version of like gluten-free cereals, mainly because the cereals are fairly bland in their own right, so I get different textures and flavours and put them together. So it changes every week depending on what's in the box.
I think diet may not be the answer for every child with autism spectrum disorder, but certainly from my own personal experience, I've seen a number of children who have just, you know, blossomed as a result of being on systematic dietary intervention.
We know there have been complementary medical systems for thousands of years, and it would be marvellous if they worked. And it's wonderful if parents see a certain dietary manipulation improves their child. Of course people will want to cure it. I'd love it if there was a diet I could give for all the children I see, but there isn't. All I can do is give support and the basic understanding of current knowledge and say, well, let's first do no harm and look at it sensibly.
I mean, having a child like Rohan, you know, who has such high, you know, support needs, he needs to be attended to most of the time. And if I spend my time looking into what I can bake, which is gluten-free and this and that, I think I won't be able to. I mean, it'll all be too stressful for the whole family, you know what I mean? I think it takes a very special couple to be able to stick together and, you know, to try and bring up a child like, you know, like Rohan and, you know, any kind of children who've got high support needs, I think. Or any kind of, isn't it, disability, I would say. So I think it takes a very special couple. It is a lot of hard work.
Some nights Nick comes home and, you know, he doesn't get dinner because I've spent all afternoon cooking a separate meal for Alexander and a separate meal for Oliver. And, you know, I'm like, oh, what are we going to eat? But it is incredibly demanding on personal relationships.
It was difficult. It was very difficult in the fact that, you know, as, well, at that time I was working 9 to 5 in a 9 to 5 job, so I could walk out of the home from any problems and come home at 6 o'clock at night and not have to deal with them. But I come home to Deb, who had been dealing with the behavioural problems of...
crying on the kitchen floor.
Yeah, basically a shattered mess most days.
Oh, it has been. We're church going, but we even found the pressures there that, you know, we felt embarrassed because our child, we can't control our child, and people don't understand why he can't understand a simple instruction and he can't settle, and so it is very distressing, and you do feel cut off from the rest of society because obviously it's still a minority illness and most children are normal, and of course you feel exceptional, and that's a centre like this you do. The other aspect is that we do feel a sense of comfort and acceptance that there are others like us, and the people, the staff here are so supportive and they give you hope.
Parent to
parent-to-parent support and established parent-to-parent support is one of the key factors, I think, that parents need to be linked into just to keep them sane in some ways. That, yeah, and it's good, and they can also share their successes, so it's not just all negativity. But when you go and visit someone's house, like some of our parents visit each other's houses, it's lovely because you don't have to explain your child to that person either.
I've got a 21-year-old autistic son. He's got one word he's coming out with. It's with females that he knows, going up and getting eye contact and saying, "Sex, please." Yeah. So what do we do? Yeah. He can't tell us what he wants, but
he probably wants sex.
He can't.
I was performing at my talk. It's a lot easier for me to get into role and be on stage and perform a particular given role of presenting, educating people about autism than it is to talk one-on-one situation or in a group where there is all the waves. I find being in a city where there are lots of traffic, lots of people, lots of movement, very difficult because I'm not sure where to direct my focus. If I want to... the waves are splashing, which is absolutely wonderful. I live in Warrnambool, which is the largest town on the southern coast of Victoria in Australia. We have beautiful seabirds, and the whales, the southern right whale in particular, come to Warrnambool. We have a bed and breakfast unit that I think is particularly autism friendly. Families with autistic children can come and have a holiday. I travel all over, not just Australia, but Europe as well now, and talk to teachers, parents, social workers, psychologists, anybody that has any interest in understanding autism. I didn't have a place, I couldn't work, I've never had the ability to hold down a job. Do you know that's a bit of a metaphor? Do you know what that means? Yeah, keep a job. I've not been able to do that, but whereas now I feel I have a job. I can write, I can teach, and it gives me a great feeling of being useful or something like this. It does heaps for my self-esteem. Yeah.
We are different people because of what we've experienced. I'm so much better as a parent than what I would have been had we not been through this.
He's 4.5 and hasn't acquired any language. He's got the picture-based language to communicate sort of basic needs, but a lot of children, autistic children, apparently do develop late. We haven't given up on him.
I've learnt to understand the way that Eric thinks, which is a great help, and my family's the same too. They can have a better understanding of autism now, which is just great.
In the last 3 or 4 months, he has just made my heart surge because he's just been so much happier in his own right. From here on in, I think a lot of Oliver's future depends on how he takes it. It's looking very bright.
He used to be much more aggressive around last year and the year before. He used to constantly pull my hair and, and hit me and things like that, but it is starting to get better now.
The next 5 years, I would really like to see understanding of autism grow in the wider society. And I want the world to understand. So if in the next 5 years we can make some steps to gaining that understanding, so that as our children grow up and they engage in the world that they're living in, they're not misunderstood. And that's what I would like to see. I've got a dictionary of metaphor I'm writing at home for people with autism, which is it's quite interesting, because you can explain, no, when he says pull your socks up, mate, he doesn't mean bend down and pull your socks up. And the little person says, well, why does he say it then? It's a metaphor. It's a metaphor. You go to the cinema, you watch a brilliant movie, you cry your eyes out. That's a metaphor. And you ring a mate the next day and you say, oh, I watched this beautiful movie, I was moved, even though you didn't leave your seat. I have whole villages that don't talk to me. I'm serious. I've upset lots of people. I've had that I thought were firm friends, and I had one lady, in fact, say to me, I would love to be a friend for you, someone who's available to you and to help work on particular things I was having problems with. So I rang her up at about 3:30 one morning. In England last year, I got to an event 3 hours ahead of time because I get worried about being late. I waited 2 hours and then left because I waited long enough. You know? This timing thing that you seem to have